Hey everyone, this is KP from KP's Watches. I hope you're all having a great day. Today we have a quick overview of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Datejust Turnograph from the 1960s and 70s. In specific, this is the reference model 1625 with the two-tone bezel and case. This is actually one of my personal watches and one of my favorite watches to wear. Because of its mix of sportiness and classiness, you can actually put this on a leather strap and wear it to events to look a bit classier, or you can keep it on its Jubilee bracelet and also have it look a little bit sportier if you like. Even get an Oyster Perpetual, an Oyster bracelet if you'd like to make it a little bit more classy. Here's a quick view of the watch on my wrist. This is the champagne dial in the two-tone variant. It is absolutely stunning in real life. I need to stop saying absolutely in my watch reviews, so I'll try and keep them away from that. So let's go over a quick overview of the watch. So it's an automatic watch. It is a superlative chronometer, which means that it is accurate to +6, -4 seconds per day. It is the two-tone variant. I believe this is an 18K model. I am not sure, as the bezels are not actually stamped with the gold quality on them. This is something that Rolex doesn't do with their vintage models. The bezel actually rotates in both directions. So this is the sort of anti-clockwise direction and this is the clockwise direction. There are no clicks. It's simple, smooth rotation with a slight bit of friction, not hard enough that you can't move it. There is a coin edge on the side of the bezel that allows you to grip it very tightly and very securely. On the right-hand side here, you have the Rolex crown. Now, the crown is actually a smaller size than the 1601, which is sort of the same Datejust model. So here is a Datejust 1601, but the crown is actually bigger than the one on the 1625 because the bezel actually sticks out further than the bezel on the fluted variation of this watch. So going back to the Datejust Turnograph, one of my favorite things about this watch is the size. It actually looks a little bit bigger than the 36mm Datejust on the wrist, and that is because of the bezel sticking out further than it usually does on the regular Datejust. So on larger wrists, it does wear a lot nicer. It looks a little bit larger and a little bit beefier. The case is actually different in shape to the original 1601, so they aren't compatible. Here, if I turn over this 1601 and I open the bracelet very quickly here, let me see if I can show you. But the cases are actually different. You can see here on the edge next to the case back, there's actually a groove before the lugs start. And the case is actually thicker in shape next to the actual case back. The case back is also larger. You can see that there's a larger edge behind the sort of coin edge of the case back. From the side, I think they look pretty much similar, essentially. But the case is different. It's a bit of a beefier case. It's not exactly like the Submariners of the time, but it is a stronger case, if that makes sense. The case back is, as usual, simply sort of flat grain finished with a polished edge to it. Nothing special there, but extremely comfortable to wear on the wrist. Also, something to keep in mind is the crystal is actually different in size to that of the 1601, since the bezel has a smaller inner diameter than that of the fluted bezel. So the parts are not actually interchangeable between the two, which is a good thing because it makes it harder for these to be sort of Franken-watched as per se. The same with the dial. So these dials are actually not replaceable with the 1601 variation, and most of them tend to have the same hour markers that we have here, these flat stick hour markers with lume plots on the edges and the regular hands. There are versions with the leaf hands and they look really, really good. If I ever get the opportunity to buy one of those, I definitely will go for it. Now, if you are looking to buy one of these watches, maybe we should talk about some things to keep in mind if you're looking to pick one up. The first thing to take a look at is the bezel. The bezel is made of solid yellow gold or white gold, and over time it will start to wear if the watch has been worn extremely sort of roughly. So here, for example, you can see that this bezel has very sharp edges on these little bumps over here. The numbers are very sharp and crisp. There isn't any sort of grazing or removal of that. Here you can see that there's a sharp point. A lot of these watches, if they've been overworn, they will have these soft edges. There won't be sort of a sharp angular tip to these individual markers between 10 and 20, for example. So the 5-minute markers, essentially. The same with this little triangle here. Here on the triangle, if I try and bring it up close here, you'll see that all of the edges on the triangle, there's actually individual little edges on the triangle itself that makes it very sharp. So keep that in mind. The second thing to look at is the dial. Now, these dials cannot be changed. As I mentioned before, they do not swap with the 1601 dials. So that means that if you're buying one, be sure that the perimeter of the dial, where the minute track is, doesn't have any bleeding from water damage or any sort of what you'd call chips in the paint, because finding a replacement dial for this will be very difficult to do. So I highly recommend you make sure that the dial is in crisp condition. One of my favorite things to say about watches is that you can always get replacement parts for the movement, but the dial and the hands and the bezel, maybe the bezel you can replace, but the dial especially is not something that is easily replaced, especially on collectible watches. So if you're going to buy one, get one in the best condition dial, and the rest of the watch you can fix later on or take it to Rolex for fixing. Again, if you take it to Rolex, Rolex will swap the dial out for something that is clearly not period correct, and that will affect the collectability of the watch. So very quickly, let me go ahead and unscrew the crown. Now, something to keep in mind with this watch is in the 1960s and 70s, this has the 1570 movement. So that means that when I pull the crown out to the second position, it automatically goes to changing the time. So you can't actually quick set the date on this watch. So in order to change the date, you actually have to go through the 24 hours. It swaps over at midnight, and then you have to keep going another 24 hours for the next day. If you rotate it backwards, it will go back in time a day before. So there isn't a way to quick jump between the two like some watches did have in the past. So that is just something to keep in mind. It does take a little bit of labor to set the date. However, it's part of the charm of owning the watch, of course. You know, when it came from this time period, that's what the watches were like, and it's just part of it. The bezel is extremely useful for timing things like when I'm cooking, for example, or if I need to just wait for something. If someone says, I'll meet you in 5 minutes or come back in 5 minutes, I just simply swap the bezel 5 minutes from where it is right now. So I'll usually move it in this direction and put it somewhere like that. Or I can just go ahead and do this, and then the hour marker will move 5 minutes in advance, and I'll say, oh, 5 minutes has elapsed, I can go see them now, or 10 minutes has elapsed. So I do find it extremely useful on a regular basis. I wouldn't say it is the most practical. Of course, you have a smartwatch, but it's always fun to wear, or very fun sort of tool to use when you get to use it, essentially. You get this watch on a Jubilee strap most of the time. I have seen the rare occasion with the Oyster bracelet as well, but I haven't seen one come up for sale of recently where you can buy it with the Oyster bracelet. So they are pretty rare, so I would keep that in mind. Here we have it on a leather strap. The original strap of this watch is actually a USA-made oval link bracelet, extremely rare, and I will show you that in another video. But yeah, so this is a quick review or overview of the watch. I think it's one of the best models that Rolex has made. I find it extremely beautiful in person, and I hope you enjoy this watch. Let me know if you have any thoughts or opinions in the comment section below, and please give us a subscribe if you found information useful or are looking forward to other videos that we produce. Have a good one.